So we're here for another deep dive with Dean. This is, and for those that don't know, we do this on a Wednesday. Dean, this is quickly becoming one of the highlights of my week. Wednesday morning, conversations.
I agree.
Right?
I agree. I'm ready for it. Looking forward to it. Like, it'd be great. Sit and have a chat with Phil. Love it.
It's really everyone's dream on a Wednesday morning. They want to get in a room with Phil, just chat, talk about the issues.
I think that's true. And I'm invited. I got to come.
You are invited.
I'm going to talk a little bit about stuff like that today, but man, how lucky am I?
You are a lucky man. You really are a lucky man. So we're looking at party theology. We've been doing this at True North for a couple of weeks now. Just been so much fun just considering those two aspects of what the life of faith means expressed in those kind of moments of celebration, different parties. And today we're going to be looking at a really cool parable that you've been spending a lot of time on, getting into, reading through, doing some great messages as well. And one of the things that I love about it is this sense with invitations going out, then this idea of party regret. So like you've been invited to something, you choose not to go and maybe you miss out on an incredible experience. Or on the flip side, of course, you go and have a really bad experience. You're like, man, I should have just stayed home and watched. Give me a bad Netflix show.
A bad Netflix show?
Say yes to the dress. I should have. Say yes to the dress.
I definitely agree to that.
I don't personally watch that, but sometimes it happens to me when I'm at home and my wife's doing things. But so if you've got listeners, any stories of party regret, you'd love to send those through. Get in contact with us. We want to tell our best party regret stories if we've got them. But we are going to
also if you regret watching Say Yes to the Dress, you can feel free to talk about that as well.
Maybe we could start a support group on a separate channel. I feel like I'd have some contributions there. It's like, have you ever seen this show? Say Yes to the Dress?
It depends what you mean by seeing it. Like, has it been on? I'm not sure I'm ready to say I've watched it. Has it been on in the room? For sure.
You've got a sense of the concept?
Very big.
And so of course, to really distill this down, one of the key moments, they get to the end of the show. And basically, let's imagine this scenario. You are the bride, and a lovely, charismatic woman from Atlanta will say to you, I can't do the accent. Dean, can you do an Atlanta accent?
I know.
Okay, well, we won't try. But basically, it's like, so Dean, are you ready to say yes to the dress? And then they either say yes and like do this kind of stuff. But anyway, we're talking about a better experience of party and celebration today. The parable of the great banquet that we see in Luke 14. So you've been having some fun with this. Dive in, tell us a little bit more. Maybe we'll read the scripture.
Yeah, I was thinking maybe we'll do that today. We're while we dive in on it, I'm just going to read the story. It's such a cool parable Jesus tells. Got kind of so much. It's quite visual. It's one of those great stories you can really dive into. So I thought, let's read it, and then we'll just kind of talk a little bit about these dynamics, what we're reflecting on.
Right.
So Luke 14, Jesus says this. When one of those at the table with him heard this, so he's at a table, he's at a Sabbath, kind of banquet of its own right. And this guy at the table says to Jesus, "Blessed is the one who will eat at the feast in the kingdom of God." And Jesus replies with this story. So there's a certain man, he's preparing a great banquet, and he invited many guests. At the time of the banquet, he sent his servants to tell those who'd been invited, "Come, everything's ready." But they all begin to make excuses. The first says, "I just bought a field, I gotta go see it, please excuse me."
As you do, right? You buy a field, like there must be a huge number of variables one needs to assess when buying a field. It's like, yep, I'm out there.
That's true.
Sorry, you keep going. This is how my mind works.
No, I'm
what is that guy thinking in that moment?
What's he thinking?
How has my field changed since last time I looked at it?
Anyway, is it still there? Has someone stolen it?
That's right.
So, another said, "I've just bought 5 yoke of oxen. I'm on my way to try them out. Please excuse me." Still another said, "I just got married, so I can't come." The servant comes back, reports this to his master, but the owner of the house becomes angry and orders the servant, "Go out quickly into the streets, the alleys of the town, bring in the poor, the crippled, the blind, and the lame." "Sir," the servant said, "what you ordered has been done, but there's still more room." Then the master told his servant, "Go out to the roads, the country lanes, and compel them to come in, so that my house will be full. I tell you, not one of those who are invited will get a taste." And so, we thought, let's just have some conversations around it. It's been exploring on Sundays and just kind of what some of the dynamics are here.
Yeah, I love it. Great passage, and there's a lot in there, and I'm sure we'll get to this in a bit more detail later. But what does this mean for us right now as we express the kingdom, and then what is Jesus talking about ultimately here through what the life of faith is. So one of the things that strike me, and even as you were talking, like the dude saying, yeah, I've got to go check on my field. The other guy's I've got to go check, like, try out my oxen right now. My 5 oxen, I got to make sure they work. I'm assuming that's plow related or something like that. But one of the great things that comes out of this, and we think about party regret, not going to things we're invited to, maybe showing up to things and not having experience we thought we would. So one of the things I look at this, when we think about the invitation that Jesus is talking about here, why do sometimes we say no to that kind of invitation? Like, what are some of the forces that can drive us away from that?
Well, I think one of the interesting things to me, a few people shared with me after kind of, we went through this passage and talking about it, is this dynamic of that seems to be quite a human thing to sort of say, yep, I'll go, I'm in, but then not to show up.
Yeah.
And just how, especially even now, it I don't know, it seems to get amplified. So I couldn't probably tell you how many stories I heard. It would take me a minute to count them up, of people going, actually, I just did that.
Yeah.
I threw a party, invited people, they told me they were coming, and then they didn't show. And I think it is really interesting that right now we live in sort of a time in history where it does seem a little amplified. The idea to say, yes, I'll come unless something better comes along.
Yeah.
And that seems to be like a real common tendency. And I think, I don't know. I think there's really something in that we've all got to wrestle with. I mean, I don't know. Like for you, if you were to say yes to the dress, you're like, I'm going, but only it's a party.
Yeah.
Say yes to the party. Would you bail? Would you pike if you? And be honest. Like, Jesus is listening, and so am I.
No, that's good.
I don't know. It's an interesting
I
thing.
reckon it would be the nature of your yes. So let's say if me and you are having a conversation, you say, Phil, this Friday night we're going to watch, are the Browns playing?
Not on Friday night, but I'll tell you when. Maybe on Monday we could watch together.
Yeah, okay, cool. So if it's a legitimate conversation, you're like, Phil, some guys are coming over.
Yeah,
it's
going to be great.
We're going to throw something on the barbie, have a meal, watch the game. And if I'm like, in that moment, if I'm like, yeah, that's awesome, let's do that. For me, if there's a conversation like that, I'm like, I'm in, I'm going to do that. And for me, it would be like, if I can't do that, then it would be a conversation again, like, hey man, really sorry, something's come up, whatever. Yeah. But then I think there's this...
Got some oxen. You want to check out your oxen instead of the brown.
Yeah. Or maybe there's a bull's game on. I want to try my bull's out.
Try your bulls.
Season started.
That's the oxen. That's quite good. Yeah.
But then I guess what we have, and even thinking about how often one of the filters that we have to events and parties now is social media. And you even think about something like Facebook, it's like, you two options. I'm interested or I'm going. So if it's like, and that is nature, right? It's like, how is that training us to respond to invitations to community?
And that, I think exactly what you said. How is that training us? So the kind of nature of, especially in a social media age, and so even the younger or more frequently use that stuff.
Me?
Like you, young guy, young Gen Z type right here. We're big on that. So, when we are trained, I think that's a great word. We get trained to kind of like, I'm interested.
Yeah.
And interested means, I think that's good unless something better comes up. It's really what interested means. Yeah. And
low commitment.
It's super low commitment. Like, I think it's good, but I'm going to see what else comes along. And then, what's that?
I was just going to say, and isn't it funny that like in conversation that would never come out? I was like, Dean, that sounds kind of good, but I reckon there's a 50-50 chance I'll come up with something better for that night. So I'll let you know. But that would be the brutal honesty.
Yes, that's right.
Do you think anyone talks like that?
No one. But isn't that, but it's true now, this new grid and filter that comes, we're okay with it.
Yeah.
Like in the conversation, and sometimes you might, if you're like, look, I'm kind of interested in that Browns thing, but to be honest, if anyone invites me to anything mildly better, I will not be there. Like, but social media creates a grid where you can do that without doing it face to face. And I think I think it's really, important to go, okay, what is that training us to do? Because this is the essence of discipleship. It's training. How do you live your life?
Yeah.
What are you interested in? So we end up getting discipled or trained by some of the, that phrase, the medium is the message, Marshall McLuhan. The stuff we use, what we're doing, it becomes the message. The tools we're using, they're training us to respond to things. And so then I think a really good challenge in today's world is to go, okay, so what's Jesus really driving at here?
Yep.
And he's going like, I've got this great invitation, life in the kingdom of God, knowing the joy of the kingdom. And every one of these people said, they clicked going. They went all the way to going, but then went, I've got something else. And I think going, how do we, so here's our challenge if we want this to go deep in our lives, is that like when it comes to really walking with Christ, following him in the kingdom of God, trying to walk in kingdom ways, trying to experience the kingdom joy, because that's what this is about. It's a banquet, it's a party. The only way to really do that, I think that's one of the things here, is that like, you actually have to commit. You actually got to say yes, and then you've got to go, I'm not going to get swayed by, that looks pretty good too. But man, that's a challenge today, isn't it? Like to actually go, that's the way I say yes to following Christ. I go, yep, I'm in, I'm going, and I show up. I'm actually now demonstrating this in my life, trying to walk in it.
So I think a huge part of it is being self-aware and honest enough that we bring this growing filter to community that's like, kind of interested, or go, we bring those same set of filters to the invitations that Christ has in our journey of faith, which for me is that's coming out of my mouth and articulating in my mind for the first time. I'm like, geez, that's not good.
I know. I was just, as you were saying that, thinking like, how many things have I clicked interested in? And what did I even mean by that? Like, why did I, am I interested? Am I not? And it is true. It's so easy to.
So often when you do that interested thing, it's like, that would be good for someone else. I'm not really going to go, but maybe someone I know that could be good for.
True.
And maybe that's part of that thing. And even sometimes what we can think about what Christ is inviting us to is like, that seems pretty good for someone. I've got like interest there, but to actually, like you said, to show up for your yes to be yes, and to be like, I'm committed, I'm in, here we go.
That's, there's a lot of challenge there, I think what I love as well, I mean, this is just the beauty of marveling at, I think, the scriptures and Jesus' teaching, is you just go, here it is across the centuries. And it could not be more relevant.
Right.
You know what I mean? It's a story about fields. It's about parties and fields and oxen. And of course the guy married as well. And you just go, when you really look at what he's getting at here, far out. Like he couldn't have been more relevant to today's world,
So I guess as we take that a little bit further and think about how does it play out on the ground in our lives, this kind of challenge of invitation and the invitation that Christ brings to our lives. I guess we've kind of, as we've been talking, we've kind of identified two kind of streams in how we connect with that invitation. But in your mind, does anything else pop out, or as you've been reading into this passage around, what are some of these challenges of invitation, or perhaps who we invite into community in our lives? I think there's a great thread here that Christ is inviting. There's first it goes here, and he just says, no, there's still room. Keep inviting, keep inviting. So I think as you live out the kind of here and now of this parable and this idea of inviting people into community around the table, there's clearly some challenges there. What are some that kind of come to your mind as you've been reflecting on this?
But look, I think like you said, the second half of this parable, I mean, really in lots of ways, the other thrust of this parable is just about who do you invite and who do you bring, who's coming to the party. And I think that kind of reality, okay, so he's going to push us here, go out into the streets, go to the country lanes, go to the people who don't usually get invited. Because I think the more often we get invited, the more likely we are to, click interested or to say going, but sort of like whatever, there'll be another party. And I think that invitation, it is a real challenge, because when it comes to, the day-to-day experience of that, like it's really hard. To go. So, the people who don't normally get invited to parties, guess what? They don't necessarily have all the manners. Or in this case, he says, go invite like the crippled and the blind, the lame. Not only are these outsiders, that all makes it harder. Now you've got to think about, how do you help these people navigate, get around, provide care? How do you ensure, it's safe? All those things. So there's a challenge just in that. I think there's an inconvenience factor here. There's both this kind of, we gravitate towards inviting perhaps more similar people, and this push to go and invite the outsiders. Don't invite the people that you get something from. Invite those. But it will be inconvenient. And I think, and inconvenient in that sense, I think, whenever you invite outsiders, they don't always know the lingo. They won't know. You may share less in common. They may not have, let's call it, party manners. They may speak in ways, and I think when it comes to, say, life in the kingdom, these people on the outside, well, guess what? They're, and you see this over and over. This is a theme of Jesus and groups of people, like the house he was in, a Pharisee's house on Sabbath, where he's constantly kind of having to push them of like, we're all used to being around people who think the same and talk the same and do the same, but he's just like, go to those who are on the outside. And when you do that, it will inherently get messier.
So I think one of the things that Jesus does so well, and I love the phrase he said about it's just so applicable here and it's so applicable here as well, is that really what he's keying in on, and we all know, is that it's way easier to hang out with people that we already know.
That's right.
Right? Like,
that's right.
I was even thinking a little bit about the, kinds of party experiences that I really liked. And I don't like this about myself, but one of the realities is the parties and those kind of meals and experiences that I really love is when I know every person really well.
Here's the moment, right? Ever been you're at the reception? And like, the whole night is gonna make or break on what I'm looking. You're looking for what table? You're looking at the board, and you're like, where'd I land? What'd they do with me? Who am I gonna be next to? And like, that's it. You're sort of like, man, I hope they're my age. Sometimes you get invited away. Like, I hope we have some. It's so easy. And I say that to like, that's the reality. Like, you can. I don't know, maybe I'm shallow, all those things, whatever, but you look at it and you go, oh, who am I? Oh, awesome. I'm next to, if you feel, because and this is the thing I think for me, the night will either be easier if it's people you can easily talk to, or you're gonna be working hard to carry a conversation. And it sometimes. Now, and I say all that, some of those times it's like get next to somebody, like, this was so great. I'm so glad I actually got to sit here. And you end up with a whole new connection. But the feeling, I know that ends up in my mind and head sometimes, if I'm perfectly honest, is just like, am I gonna have to work here, or will it be easy? You know?
I think that's a great observation, as we kind of distill down, because I feel these things, and I'm sure our listeners feel the same things as well, and actually getting, okay, why do we feel that?
Or they're watching and going, what is wrong with those guys? Like, why? Hopefully somebody resonates.
They're like, never invited those guys to a wedding reception. They're stuck up. They're jerks. They can. Well, what was I going to say?
I'm not sure. I'm sorry.
No, that's fine.
I'm making it hard for you to have a conversation.
No, but like distilling down, okay, why do we feel like this? I don't think it's because we're bad people. And I love what you brought up there. It's like, it's just literally that the energy required to form new relationships and invite people into our lives is significantly higher than the energy required to hang out with people that we know. So I think one of those challenges that we've got to overcome, if we're going to take hold of this heart that Jesus is, communicating through this parable, is, are we required to bring the energy to bring people into our world? And I'm sure we've all met people like that. They're just like, how does that person have the relational capacity that they have to like...
And and I think it can be easy as well to write that dynamic off as, how did they do it? They must be an extrovert. And I think but I think one of the challenges I look at, you use the word there, how do you bring the energy for that?
Yeah.
And I think it's easy to write some people off and go, they're an extrovert, they can do it. Or to excuse myself and go, well, look, I'm just an introvert. Or my extrovert energy has been burned up all through the week, and that's why I'm having this feeling. But I think instead just to go, look, there's a reality here, but what that requires is, how do I find that energy? Because we all have more energy probably than we think. And
Absolutely.
what Jesus is saying is, you're gonna have to, I think one of the things that come up is like, yeah, you've actually gotta, you gotta say no to what's convenient and easy, and compel those you might have otherwise never thought of. And I think even in those spaces to be able to go, because like I said, some of those times I'm like, oh, I looked at the board and I was like, I don't know any of those people, and I actually walk away going, man, I'm so glad I sat next to them. Like I actually did meet someone new and hear a super interesting story about their life. And I think even one of the things I find as well, on those notes, even when I don't feel like I have any energy to connect relationally, like you said, one of the easiest things is just to be interested in someone else. And to be willing to then listen. You don't actually have to always talk. It's just about that, like, can you find a way within who you are? I'm probably talking to myself as much as anything while I'm fleshing this out, to just say, I know my pull is going to be towards the people that are easier or more convenient, but I have to just choose instead to leverage what energy, whatever capacity I do have, to say, I need to be looking towards those who I will get nothing from, and towards those who I'm like, that's a little outside the normal circle for me. And I think that just I think that's a bit of what Jesus just go, and this is all about how do you bring people into the kingdom, and to do that, it's inherently, I think, a relational thing.
That's right.
And so that's going to be a reality. How do we relationally extend that offer of relationship to a community so that people can experience the kingdom?
Absolutely. And it is that picture expressed right here that bringing people into the kingdom means bringing people to our table. Like I think they're not two things that can be divorced as much as sometimes we'd like that maybe, but it's like, no, this is what this means is a meal together around the table.
I think that is a good, and I think important as we do kind of, focus on this particular parable and what he wants, like, yes, the kingdom, the banquets picture the kingdom that the banquet master is throwing. It's a place of joy and relationship. It's a place of, he says he wants his house to be full. I love this picture of like that house, just like, you ever been in those, like a party where it's just shoulder to shoulder, and and some people will like that and some won't, but hopefully, in the banquet house, I'm sure that he's created some of those kind of cozy corners where 2 or 3 can chat.
That's right.
And then like there's spots where it's like all the people who love just kind of, whatever, but I think this picture of like, the house is full, and when you're in those spaces, like there's so much joy. And the joy is because of the people are there. Like you could have the same food, the same music, but if there's no people, the joy is lost.
And I think the other thing, there's no lines of exclusion. And that is a huge source of joy as well. That when everyone, no matter who you are, this is where you belong. This party's for you. This feast is for you.
And I think and I think that is the challenge for us to compel, because that's what Jesus wants. Like, okay, we need to be people as well who go far and wide and compel people who it will perhaps require more energy, will perhaps be the people we didn't first think of, will perhaps be people who right now feel on the outside and like this is not a party for them. But I think when we do kind of grab hold of this and we actually say yes to our own invitation. We say yes to the invitation. We say yes. I'm in.
I'm sorry, I just can't unfilter say yes to the dress.
I can't say anything.
I deeply regret bringing that up, because now every time I read this passage, say yes to the invitation of Jesus.
Well, once you say yes and you lock it in, that's it. And you're like, and now we've got, I think as we focus on our own gratitude for what life he's given us, that actually, if we have even, if you're a person who has even a couple people at your table whom you love and share life with, and boy, you're blessed. And if you have more, even more, you know, and out of that blessing should come that sense of how do I compel other people? You know, how do I compel? And I think, you know, how do I keep looking for those who are on the outside? Nobody's invited them. Get a little uncomfortable. How do I bring them in? You know, and I think that's a challenge, you know. And Jesus does not pull punches, does he? He's just like,
not even a little.
Oh man, you just far out.
Yeah. I think one of the pictures I love about this, I sometimes think about how people see faith that are not of faith, and these kind of pictures of the party, the feast, the banquet, the meal. Like I think that's a picture that people experience faith like that.
That's right.
That transforms it into something that's actually appealing. That's something right. I want to ask another question about this based on what I'm experiencing around the table. And obviously, like Jesus, he's got this worked out already, right? He's given us this picture. Yes. This is how people will come to see what faith really is, by sharing great meals, great times. And with no lines of exclusion. It's just like, this is it. If people can experience this, they'll experience who I really am.
That's what it's pointing towards.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
It's great.
So I guess,
well, I have not found this conversation to be work.
Well, that's good.
I appreciate that.
Great.
I don't know if that's good or bad.
Yeah. Maybe if I try to be more rigid and wooden, maybe a little bit more judgmental. Just like... I don't know if we want to touch on this, but here's another thought with this passage, and I love this contained within the parables. There's always application to kind of bring into our experience of life. And I guess in this picture, one of the things that you've identified in other spaces, that there's a here and now aspect to this of the kingdom around the table. But then there's also a picture of and not yet, that kind of sense of already but not yet in terms of what Jesus is describing here.
I think that that is always an important dynamic. And I think even if we try and go right, and we're trying to drill down, or trying to just go, how do we make sure we're getting, you know, everything out of this passage that Jesus wants for us? Like, we have to be reminded that this is a picture of the kingdom, and it's a picture of that kingdom that one day, He's going to make all things new. There will be a banquet and a party that's beyond anything we can imagine, but the best snapshot he can give us is it's going to be like the best banquet you've ever been to, you know, the best party, the best celebration. And so we need to realize, like, there is this sense of how are we, I think, compelling and inviting people so that they are part of that banquet. You know, I think that's Jesus very much wants in this passage, clearly for the people at whose house he was at, and this, you know, for the Pharisees to, you know, we need to rethink who we're inviting and bringing compelling. And as the guy said, blessed is one who eats them. There's a forward-looking future sense of, right, life is moving there. That's the end point. That's what we got to get to. But I think there is also, we're very clear, he says, in plenty of other spaces, the kingdom of God has come near, or is at hand, depending on how you translate it, which means it's here, it's now. And it is this invitation as well to go, how are you living in the joy of the kingdom right here, right now? And so I think we should always keep in mind those two dynamics to it, because this isn't a parable as well, I think, just about like, hey, who can be friends with? That's not it. It's about how do we invite people into the kingdom, both to live in it then and in those foretastes that have come now. And
isn't that such a cool picture that as followers of Jesus, we're actually invited to make our current experience of life on planet Earth more like heaven. They're literally by starting to engage in these kind of questions, we're saying, how can we make our parties a bit more like heaven? How can we make our meals a bit more like heaven? And that wonderful invitation of what we get to try and, I guess, emulate as the people of God.
That's awesome. Cool.
Well, it's been fun, man.
It's been fun.
I love it. This has been a good Wednesday. I look forward to our next one.
Me too.
Yeah, Wednesday.
Me too.
I think there's something about the mid-morning conversation.
We stop, we get to chat about good things. I feel encouraged and inspired afresh.
Me too.
It's good.
And wait, what did we throw to the listeners? We wanted them to bring in their...
if you have any party regret. You said no to the invitation, and then after, because that's the thing here. Everybody says no. They got another...
We want to hear those. Awesome. We'll see you next time.